I was making dinner. My hands smelled like garlic and oil. But what happened next made me freeze. It wasn't loud. It wasn't wrong. But it felt like a moment that shouldn't have happened. His hand touched mine. His eyes lingered. And then he tasted something that wasn't just food. Now maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe it was innocent. But the way it happened, the way he looked at me afterward, it's something I still can't explain. Some people say the line between comfort and closeness is simple, but when you grow up in a house where love fills the empty spaces, you learn that silence can carry more weight than words. And if you really want to understand what happened that night, you'll have to see how it all began. Because this story didn't start in the kitchen. If you've ever had a moment. That felt normal, but something deep inside told you it wasn't. Write "felt" in the comments. Subscribe for more stories that speak what no one dares to say. Comment your city. We're building a map of unheard stories. It had been a while since I'd been home. Months, maybe more. Life had gotten busy. College, work, trying to grow into someone who didn't need to rely on anyone. But when Dad called and asked if I wanted to come by for dinner, there was a softness in his voice I couldn't ignore. "I'll cook," he said. "Like old times." It was a familiar promise. Oh, warm one. The kind of offer that tugged at the little girl in me, the one who used to sit on the counter and steal bites of raw cookie dough while he stirred pasta. When I arrived, the house smelled like garlic, herbs, and something vaguely sweet. Maybe his old cologne still lingering in the curtains. He greeted me with a smile that didn't quite hide how much he'd missed me. We didn't talk about Mom. We hadn't in years, but her absence lived in the quiet between us. The kitchen looked the same. Same mismatched dishes. Same wooden spoon with the cracked handle. I took off my jacket, rolled up my sleeves, and joined him by the cutting board. He handed me a knife and gestured towards the vegetables. "You still remember how to dice an onion?" I laughed. "You mean how you taught me to dice an onion?" It started light. He guided my hand when I hesitated, gently adjusting my grip. Once, his fingers wrapped around mine, just briefly, to correct my angle. "Like this," he said, his voice low, warm. His hand didn't linger, but the heat stayed. We cooked together, side by side. Steam curled up around our faces. The radio hummed something soft and forgettable in the background. We talked about nothing. Bad TV shows, a funny neighbor, a broken pipe he still hadn't fixed. And then, somewhere between laughter and silence, I caught it. His eyes. Lingering. It wasn't obvious. Just a second too long. Just a glance that didn't quite move on when it should have. I looked away and kept stirring the sauce. Told myself I imagined it. Because this was Dad. And we were just making food. Weren't we? Write heat in the comments if you've ever felt something shift without a single word being said. Subscribe if you believe the quietest moments often speak the loudest. Drop your city in the comments. We're building a map of untold truths. The sauce began to bubble on the stove, low and steady. Steam curled into the air like breath. I focused on chopping the tomatoes, trying to keep the pieces even, like he'd always taught me. But I could feel it again. That heaviness. Dad stood just behind me, arms folded, watching. Not the way he used to. Back when he was simply proud I could handle a knife without nicking my fingers. This felt different. I kept my eyes on the cutting board, but I could feel his gaze lingering. Not on the tomatoes. On me. "You've really grown up," he said, his voice casual but a little too soft. I smiled politely, not looking up. "Thanks." He chuckled behind me. "No, I mean, you carry yourself different now. Strong, but still delicate." Something about that word, delicate, sat wrong in my chest. It didn't sound fatherly. It sounded like something else. I laughed it off, slicing faster than before. Guess. I'm still figuring it out. A pause. Then. No rush. Some things get better with time. It was probably nothing. Maybe he meant it as encouragement. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Still, I stirred the sauce a little harder than necessary. The silence returned, not awkward, just thick. The kind of silence that holds something inside it. Something unspoken. Something watching. He moved closer. I felt it before I saw it. The shift in air behind me. The warmth of his presence. And then, without warning, I felt his fingers gently brush my temple, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. I froze. It was the kind of gesture a father could make. The kind you shouldn't question. But it wasn't something he'd done in years. Not since I was a little girl, standing on a stool to reach the counter. His fingers lingered for just a moment too long. Not inappropriate, not clearly, just, noticeable. I looked up, meeting his eyes. They were soft, familiar. But there was something deeper behind them, something that didn't move away when I looked back. He smiled. You still make that face when you are concentrating. I forced a laugh, shifting slightly to the side, subtle but enough to break the closeness. Old habits, I said. And he said nothing more. But I could feel it. The distance between us, once filled with safety, now stretched into something strange, unfamiliar. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was tired. Maybe coming home always made me a little more sensitive than I wanted to admit. But even as I returned to the knife, the sauce, the rhythm of cooking, I couldn't shake the feeling that something invisible had moved between us. A glance, a word, a touch. Small things, but they add up. If you've ever doubted your own instincts, write "seen" in the comments. Subscribe for more stories that live in the space between silence and truth. Drop your city in the comments. We're mapping where the quiet moments live. The sauce had thickened beautifully. Bright red, glistening along the edges, just the way he liked it. I reached for the wooden spoon to stir it again, careful not to let it stick. The kitchen was warm, scented with basil, roasted garlic, and something else I couldn't name. Maybe it was just the heat from his nearness. Dad stepped behind me, close, too close for a kitchen with this much room. He didn't speak, just reached across me, arm grazing my back, to grab a spoon from the holder. His hand lingered lightly against my lower back, a soft pressure that didn't push but didn't move away either. I didn't say anything. He scooped a small amount of sauce, brought it to his lips, and tasted it. Then smiled. Perfect, he said. His voice was low, like he was speaking just to me. I smiled faintly, still watching the sauce. Good, it's your recipe. He paused. Just a second. Then quietly added, just like you. The spoon clinked against the counter as he set it down. I didn't know how to respond. It could have meant anything. Or nothing. But my hand faltered. Slightly in the pot. And then I felt it. His fingers resting on mine. I hadn't noticed he'd reached around me. He touched the back of my hand as I stirred, gently guiding my movement like he used to when I was younger. But this time, his hand didn't move away. His fingertips brushed across mine, warm and steady. Not forceful, not urgent, just still. I glanced down, watching the way our hands moved together. Slow, hypnotic, circling the sauce in silence. And then he said, hold still a second. He reached for my other hand, the one that wasn't, stirring. His fingers closing softly around my wrist. Without asking, he brought it toward the pot, dipped his own finger into the sauce, then brushed it lightly across the top of my thumb. Before I could ask what he was doing, he leaned forward and tasted it from my skin. His lips barely touched me, just enough to take the sauce. Then he looked at me. No smirk, no smile, just eyes, heavy, present. silent. Time paused there, like the whole kitchen held its breath, like the room itself had shifted into something else. I didn't move. I couldn't. Every part of me tensed, but not in fear, not exactly. Confusion, curiosity, a sudden storm of questions I didn't want to say out loud. Was this still my father showing affection? Was this just comfort in a world that's grown too cold? Or had something changed without warning, quietly crossing a line? He let go of my wrist slowly, as if he didn't want to. The air around us was thick, like we were both pretending this hadn't happened. I turned back to the stove, pretending to check the heat, pretending my skin didn't still feel the warmth of his mouth. Behind me, I could feel him watching again. Not like a parent watching their child grow, but like someone trying to read a language they didn't know they spoke. I stirred the sauce again, this time not for flavor, but for something to do. My hands shook, not visibly, just enough that I could feel it in my breath. He stepped back. I didn't turn around. Not yet, because if I did, I knew I'd see something I wasn't ready to name. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. 2 plates, 2 glasses, forks resting beside cloth napkins we never usually bothered with. The sauce was perfect, the pasta just right. But neither of us touched a bite. Dad twirled his fork idly, his gaze occasionally drifting, not to me directly, but near me. Like he was watching the space I occupied, not sure if he could step into it again. I took a small bite, mostly for show, chewed slowly, swallowed. It tasted like nothing, just memory and noise. Silence filled the room like smoke, thick, invisible, choking. The music had stopped. The kitchen clock was louder now, ticking steadily behind my right ear. Every sound, the scrape of the fork, the creak of the chair, the drip of the faucet, sounded too sharp. I kept my eyes on my plate, but in my mind, I was still at the stove, still feeling the weight of his fingers, the brush of his lips against my skin, the look he gave me after, the kind that said everything and nothing. His voice broke the silence. Too much garlic? I shook my head. It's fine. He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. A moment passed, then I felt it. His knee brushing against mine under the table. Not forcefully, not even deliberately, but enough. Enough to freeze the air between us again. I didn't pull away. Not because I wanted it, but because I didn't know what it would mean if I did. Would that make it real? Would that acknowledge something I wasn't ready to face, or was it just an accident? He kept his leg there, barely touching, still. We ate in slow motion, or pretended to. The food grew cold. My stomach was tight, not from hunger, from something else. Questions looped through my head, one after another. Did he mean it? Was that just fatherly closeness? Had I misunderstood? Misread a moment? Was I making something out of nothing? Or finally seeing something I'd ignored for years? I glanced up once. His eyes were already on me. But when I met them, he looked away. No words, just breath. Like even speaking would shatter the balance. We were barely holding, and so we sat in that balance. 2 people pretending dinner was just dinner, but everything felt louder now. Dinner ended without ceremony. He rose from the table first, stacking the untouched plates without a word. I followed slowly, each step echoing louder in the silence that now filled the house like fog. The sink was already running. When I reached the counter, warm water, suds building. We moved together in quiet rhythm, him washing, me rinsing. We'd done this 100 times before, after birthdays, after nights when Mom was still around. It was a ritual that once meant comfort, but tonight, everything was sharp, intimate, unspoken. Our hands brushed as I reached for a dish, then again when I passed him the sponge. The third time, neither of us moved. Just skin against skin, under warm water and foam, held for a second too long. pulled my hand away, gently, pretending not to notice. He said nothing, just kept washing. When we finished, I turned to dry my hands on the towel. But before I could, he was already there, gently wrapping the cloth around my fingers. "Let me," he said softly. His hands moved slow, careful, like he wasn't just drying them, but memorizing the moment. "You've grown up so much," he whispered. His breath was close. I could feel it on my cheek. Not a shout, not even a whisper really, just a warm thread of air that carried too much weight. I didn't look up, because I knew if I did, I'd see the thing we weren't saying. The thing that had lived all night in glances, in touches, in space that narrowed too quickly. He kept drying my hands, gently, thoroughly, then paused, just long enough for me to feel it. And then he let go. His footsteps were quiet as he walked away. No closing line, no good night. Just distance. I stood there, alone in the kitchen, the towel still warm in my hands. It smelled faintly of lemon soap and something else. Something like him. My heart beat slow, but deep. Not fast like fear, just steady, heavy, tired. I looked down, at my palms. They were dry now, but they still tingled, like they remembered something my mind hadn't fully named. And in that silence, I wondered, was he holding on? Or was I? The house had gone still. Lights off. His door shut. The hum of the refrigerator, the only thing keeping me company in the dark. I sat at the edge of the kitchen table, elbows on the wood, my fingers curled together, still faintly smelling of basil and oil. But the scent wasn't what lingered, it was the warmth. The memory of his touch, not rushed, not forceful, just there, measured, watching. And the look in his eyes when he tasted from my hand. Not a joke, not hunger, something deeper, something that didn't have a name. I traced it all back, moment by moment. The silence during dinner, the brush of his knee, the towel, the way he dried my hands like they were made of something fragile, the way he whispered like every word had a weight he couldn't carry. Nothing crossed a line, nothing that could be repeated out loud, not to a friend. Not to myself, but still, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Was he lonely? Was this his way of reaching for something he'd lost? Or was it me, imagining signals where there were none? A glance, a pause, a fingertip dipped in sauce and pressed to my skin. That moment, brief, quiet, echoed louder than any touch could, because my heart reacted, not with fear, not with want, just with something I didn't expect. A sharp breath, a stillness, a question. Something shifted. That much I know. He never said a word, and neither did I. But I can't forget the way it felt when he tasted the food, or when he tasted me. After part 1. Comment felt if you've ever had a moment that changed everything silently. After part 4, write I saw it in the silence if you think some moments don't need words. At the end, subscribe for more stories that say what others are afraid to say.